In a self-governing orchestra, the appointment of the principal conductor is probably the most significant and can be the most controversial task facing the Council of Management. You have to try and bring together the orchestra with a conductor that's going to build on what's gone before, enhance the orchestra's tradition, and fundamentally take the orchestra forward. There was really only one candidate, and that was Christoph von Dohnányi.
I was still a kid when the war was over, you know. I missed about 5 years making music. We didn't deal with music so much, we dealt with bombs, you know. Then I was finished school early. I was 16, right after the war, so in 46. And then I had to decide. So I was in between, and then I said, okay, I'd study, and I studied. I didn't finish law, you know, so I was only for semester, 2 years. And then I decided, no, I do music, and I had to work very hard in the beginning.
Christoph's a very unusual conductor in that he's been brought up in this great German tradition, which is fundamental to the Philharmonia, but also has an incredible imagination and great curiosity. Over and above that, Christoph is somebody who understands the orchestra from the inside, so that preparation for concerts with him is absolutely meticulous.
To find in the classical music the intention of a composer, since we lived almost 200 years later, is pretty difficult, you know, and that takes a lot of going into these times and reading and dealing with the art of these days and so on. I went to the Musikverein in Vienna, where they do have the first performance parts and so on, so with Beethoven's corrections, you know. And so in a way, it's very different. Once you have done a piece many times, you should not think you know it, you know. So I am very, very stubborn in going back as if I wouldn't know the piece. So I take all the programs I do, even if I've done the pieces many, many times. It's not a matter of knowing the notes or knowing the dynamics. It's a matter, what do I do with the piece? What is the composer asking me to do? The conductor is very important. The artist is very important. I mean, but let's face it, in the days of Beethoven, Beethoven played his pieces if he gave a concert. He didn't play a Mozart's recital, you know? And Mozart played his pieces. He knew Haydn, he knew Bach, and so on. But the best days of music were the days when the composer was doing his own music, you know? It should have been possible. For instance, in London, once we were forced to go to Queen Elizabeth Hall, I would have loved to do mainly contemporary music. But maybe it was right not to do this, because at the same time you might lose your real center public, you know, which is of course not for too much in favor for the avant-garde. To communicate with young composers wheresoever you are, and young musicians, you know. I also like very much to conduct student orchestras and things like that, you know, to find out how the young people think, and usually it's a wonderful experience. You know. So it's important, because to keep music alive, you have to deal with the young ones.
I think that he comes to the orchestra with the highest level of expectations. And it's always interesting to me that if you go to one of his rehearsals, particularly if you go to the first rehearsal, in about 30 seconds, it's his orchestra again. And as a result, you have a really warm, incredibly mellifluous sound, which fits well within the culture of the Philharmonia.
I go more from the sound, you know. I have a certain sound in my head, and they have to get this and to realize how they do it. Sometimes I don't care so much, you know. It has to sound right, you know.
He understands the necessity of a big symphony orchestra actually functioning on the same level as a chamber orchestra. So the encouragement to listen, the encouragement to think about the phrase, the encouragement to think about the texture. These are all great attributes, and these are aspects of the orchestra playing now which are at the forefront, so that when you hear Christoph conduct the Philharmonia, it's completely identifiable as his orchestra with him conducting it. And that's something that's very special. It's very special musically, but in our very crowded marketplace, it's fantastic to have a relationship which you can hear on the concert platform instantly.
As a conductor, you have to know if it sounds at my place, which is normally the worst place, you know, in a certain way, you know how it will sound there. That's why Richard Strauss always said, you know, every conductor, any conductor, before he performs anything, should go and listen to the orchestra, how it sounds in the hall, you know. And I do this very much if we travel and so on. I listen to the orchestra for a moment, you know, and in opera in any case. You know. And the place of the conductor is not the best for acoustic, but what you have here in the sound you picture and you feel you have to achieve, this you do have to create, and the experience is actually, you know, how it does sound in the hall if it sounds at your place this way. In the beginning, when I recorded, it was the main experience was not making money, you know, it was learning the pieces, you know, because if you record something, you really have to deal with everything, and you are able to listen to it, what you did, you know. In Cleveland, for instance, I did lots of recordings. We did 3 concerts, and then we did record the pieces. And this was, of course, a very wonderful experience. Now, I like best live recordings, you see, because the other experience is somehow I have done, and I have gotten the experience out of these studio recordings. Now the live recordings are more interesting for me. The spirit, how far can you leave the composer, how close do you have to be, what kind of emotion is interesting for the composer, what kind of emotion might be interesting for the public, which is not interesting for the composer, you know. So these things, this is an experience, you know.
I think the other thing is an absolute confidence when they go onto the platform that the repertoire has been so meticulously prepared that they can just let it go. And this means that the concerts are really one step beyond any rehearsal. They're exciting, they take risks, and they're really unmissable events.